So I've got an updated program here using the potentiometers shown on the left here, and just to simulate, let's say, an X and a Y input, things like RPM and load, whatever two inputs I want to use for the e-booster control. And so the result is what's called bilinear interpolation of a table or a map that's stored in the Arduino. And so as I increase RPM, it does a bilinear interpolation of the values that are in the table, RPM input and the load input, to provide an output on the table, and the same for the load. So this table screen, but if I max out both values at 999, the table max is 1100. So if I go over here to the code, this is all my previous coding for the sensor inputs and conversions and the functions that control them. And then here's the table that is being interpolated. And so I've defined essentially an x-axis, which right now I'm calling x-RPM, but this could be any input and any value. I just need to be sure I adjust the code to compensate or to accommodate. And then same thing for the y-axis. And my intervals here, I've got it's a 12 by 12 map. The intervals are 100, or step intervals are about 100 for each. And so you see here 0 is the smallest value, and as I roll the potentiometers around, it'll bilinear interpolate the values. And what you just saw was 1098, which is right close to 1100 here. So the way it works is, I'll step down here. So the first two steps is it pulls in the values from the analog pins. In this case, I'm running analog A1 and A2. A1 is the x-axis input and A2 is the y-axis input. Ultimately, I'll be pulling those values from the CAN bus, but for now it's analog. So this assigns it to the x-RPM variable with a limit, and the y load variable, of course, with a limit here as well. Then it looks at, according to the table location that those coordinates sit inside, it looks at an x1 and an x2 coordinate and a y1 and a y2 coordinate that it will use for the bilinear interpolation. And then it identifies the values of those four quadrants, quadrant 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, and 2, 2. And then these 8 variables are what go into the bilinear interpolation calculation. A pretty straightforward guy. And outputs the result. And so all of that is done with every single loop iteration. And then down here, the printing. Again, the printing is occurring at the printing interval. So that way the LCD is only updating. Right now it's every 500 milliseconds. So the screen doesn't wig out. But this logic is what I'll use to define the base map for the e-booster control. And it looks like things will work out pretty nicely.